The morning sun filtered through tall glass windows of the Johnson estate, a sprawling mansion sitting proudly on the edge of an affluent neighborhood outside Atlanta. Its marble steps gleamed, the fountain at the driveway sparkled under the light, and the manicured lawns whispered of wealth, stability, and legacy. Inside, Clara Johnson, a black woman in her late 50s, walked slowly through the halls. Her posture was elegant, her dark skin glowing with the kind of timeless beauty that came from strength rather than vanity. Years of hard work had etched fine lines into her face, but her eyes still carried warmth, the eyes of a woman who had given everything for family. This house wasn't just bricks and glass, it was her life's work. Every chandelier, every painting, every polished surface had been earned through sweat and sacrifice. Clara had built a real estate empire from nothing. She remembered her early days, facing banks that doubted her because of her race, landlords who laughed at her offers, and colleagues who never thought a black woman could rise in the ruthless property market. And yet, she had proved them wrong. She had not only built wealth, but also opened her heart to two white children who weren't her own by blood, Ethan and Grace, two tiny infants she had adopted decades ago, raising them as her own, shielding them from the hardships she knew too well. Clara smiled faintly at the memory of their small hands gripping hers, their school plays, the birthdays she planned down to the smallest detail. She had given them everything: opportunity, education, comfort. In her heart, they were hers in every sense of the word. But the house, that once echoed with laughter, now felt colder. At the breakfast table, Ethan, now 28, scrolled on his phone, designer clothes draped carelessly on his tall frame. His light skin made strangers assume he came from privilege, and he carried himself with an arrogance that matched that assumption. Across from him sat Grace, 25, her blonde curls framing a face hardened by entitlement. Clara had noticed their shift over the years. Gratitude had withered into expectation. Respect had soured into disdain. Where once they had hugged her tightly, now they rolled their eyes, dismissing her as if she were just another employee in the house she built. This morning was no different. Ethan smirked, leaning back in his chair. "So, Mom," he said with a tone that dripped with condescension, "I was talking to some friends last night. They think it's weird you still live here. I mean, at your age, don't you want, something smaller?" Grace chuckled, tapping her manicured nails against her coffee mug. "Yeah, like maybe a retirement community. This house is, well, let's face it, too much for you to handle." Clara's heart squeezed. Their words weren't just suggestions. They were sharpened blades hidden behind fake smiles. She straightened her back. "This is my home. The one I built. I'm not going anywhere." But her children's eyes flickered with something darker. Not care, not concern, something closer to calculation. Later that week, the cruelty came to life. Clara returned from her afternoon walk, the sun dipping behind the trees, casting long shadows across the driveway. As she pushed open the ornate double doors, she noticed unfamiliar voices echoing from the living room. Inside, Ethan and Grace stood with real estate agents, pointing around the grand space as if they were giving a tour. Laughter spilled through the room, and Clara froze in the doorway, her chest tightening. "What's going on here?" she asked, her voice quiet but steady. Ethan barely looked at her. "We've decided it's time for some changes. This place is wasted on you." Grace chimed in, smirking. "Don't take it the wrong way, Mom. It's just you don't really fit here anymore. People come over and, well, they think you're the housekeeper. It's embarrassing. The words hit Clara like a slap. Her dark skin, her presence in her own home, dismissed as if she were nothing but the help. She swallowed the sting, trying to find her breath. "This is my house!" Ethan finally turned, his eyes sharp, voice colder than she'd ever heard. "Not anymore. Pack your things. We don't want you here." The agents looked uncomfortable, shuffling their papers, but the siblings didn't flinch. They stood tall, cruel, united in their betrayal. That night, Clara sat alone in her bedroom, staring at the walls that had once felt safe. The laughter of her children as kids echoed in her memory, colliding with their venomous words from earlier. She felt tears prick her eyes, but refused to let them fall. They had mocked her skin, dismissed her worth, and thrown her out of the very place she had given them. All the sacrifices, all the love, erased in an instant by greed and prejudice. Yet, as the moonlight spilled across her bed, Clara's lips curled into the faintest of smiles. Because what Ethan and Grace didn't know was that the house they clung to so desperately was no longer theirs to claim. The betrayal cut deep, but Clara had already prepared for this moment. And soon, her ungrateful children would learn a lesson they would never forget. The next morning, the mansion buzzed with an eerie energy. Movers, hired not by Clara, but by her own children, carried boxes down the grand staircase. Clara stood quietly near the banister, her fingers tracing the polished wood she had once chosen herself from Italy. Grace strutted around like she already owned the place. Her pale skin glowed under the chandelier lights, her heels clicking arrogantly against the marble. "Careful with that!" she barked at a mover. Pointing at a vase Clara had bought on her first international business trip. Ethan, meanwhile, sat on the couch, sipping coffee with the smugness of a man who thought he had won. "It's for your own good, Mom," he said lazily, not even looking at her. "You'll be more comfortable somewhere, modest. Besides, this house is too much responsibility for someone like you." Someone like you. The words cut deeper than he realized. But Clara didn't argue. She didn't fight. She simply nodded, letting them believe they had stripped her of power. Inside, her heart still hurt, but there was also a growing flame, a quiet, unshakable strength. News of the Johnson children's betrayal spread through the wealthy town like wildfire. Neighbors whispered in hushed voices at the local coffee shop. "Did you hear? Clara's kids kicked her out of her own house." Another voice chimed in, heavy with judgment. "Ungrateful brats. That woman built everything they have." But not everyone was sympathetic. A group of women, all white, gathered near the boutique downtown, shaking their heads. "I always knew Clara didn't really belong in that house," one said. "She's different. The kids must have realized it too." Clara heard these words as she walked past, keeping her chin high. She was no stranger to whispers, to the subtle racism that lingered even in so-called modern times. They had doubted her when she built her empire, and now they doubted her place in her own family. But little did they know, she had a plan. Later that week, Clara sat across from her longtime lawyer, Mr. Hayes, in a quiet downtown office. His desk was stacked with papers, but his attention was fully on her. "They think they've won," Clara said softly, her dark skin glowing under the dim office light. "But Ethan and Grace don't realize what I did 6 months ago." Hayes smiled knowingly, sliding a thick folder across the desk. The property transfer went through without a hitch. The house isn't legally yours anymore. It belongs to Johnson Holdings LLC, And as CEO, you control every asset. Clara's lips curved upward, her eyes gleaming with resolve. They wanted me gone. Well, let them enjoy their little victory. When the truth comes out, they'll learn that greed has consequences. Hayes leaned back. Do you want me to proceed? Clara nodded. Not yet. Let them show their true colors. When they're at their most arrogant, that's when the lesson will land. Unaware of the storm brewing, Ethan and Grace threw a lavish party in the mansion. Expensive champagne flowed, music thumped through the halls, and guests marveled at the wealth surrounding them. Can you believe this is ours now? Grace bragged to a friend, her blue eyes sparkling. Mom was holding us back, but we're finally free to live the life we deserve. Ethan raised his glass, smirking. She should be grateful we even let her stay as long as we did. Honestly, with her background, she never really fit here. The crowd laughed, their privilege echoing in every careless chuckle. Clara stood outside on the lawn, watching through the tall windows. For a moment, the weight of betrayal pressed against her chest again. These were her children, the ones she had rocked to sleep, the ones she had sacrificed for. And now, they treated her like an outsider in her own home. But instead of tears, Clara felt resolve. The house may have looked like it belonged to them now, but the truth was already written in contracts they didn't even know existed. And soon, their laughter would turn to shock. The following week, Ethan and Grace prepared to finalize the sale of the mansion. Real estate agents buzzed around, papers shuffled, and the siblings couldn't stop bragging. Grace twirled in the grand foyer, her pale skin glowing under the chandelier. Once this sells, we'll be swimming in cash. Maybe we'll finally get that beach house in Malibu. Ethan chuckled. Yeah, and Mom, she can rot in whatever tiny apartment she ends up in. Serves her right for thinking she could raise us as her own. The words stabbed, but Clara only smiled quietly as she stepped into the room. Her presence silenced the agents, though the siblings didn't even notice her until she spoke. I see you're busy, Clara said, her voice calm but powerful. Planning your future? Grace rolled her eyes. What are you doing here? You don't live here anymore. Clara tilted her head, her smile never fading. That's what you think. The siblings laughed, dismissing her words. But deep down, a flicker of unease passed through Ethan's eyes. Because for the first time, Clara didn't look like a woman defeated. She looked like a woman who held a secret they couldn't touch. The mansion glowed like a palace that night. Ethan and Grace had thrown yet another grand party to show off their supposed ownership of the estate. Chandeliers sparkled, champagne flutes clinked, and guests in designer clothes gushed over the new masters of the house. Grace glided down the staircase in a silver gown, her pale skin radiant under the golden lights. This is just the beginning, she boasted, her voice dripping with pride. Soon, we'll expand our wealth and take our place among the real elite. Ethan, standing near the fireplace with his arm draped over a guest, smirked. We worked too hard to let anyone stand in our way. Mom had her time, but she never truly belonged here. Laughter and applause echoed through the halls, but just as the music swelled, the heavy front doors creaked open. A team of sharply dressed lawyers stepped inside, led by Mr. Hayes. Their serious expressions cut through the air like a blade. The room fell silent. Mr. Hayes cleared his throat, holding a thick folder. His voice carried authority as he spoke. Ladies and gentlemen, apologies for the interruption, but there seems to be some confusion about the ownership of this property. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Ethan's smug smile faltered. Grace stiffened. Hayes continued. This estate does not belong to Ethan or Grace Johnson. In fact, it hasn't belonged to them for months. The property was sold to Johnson Holdings, LLC, an entity under the direct control of Mrs. Clara Johnson. Whispers erupted. Eyes darted toward the siblings, who stood frozen in disbelief. Ethan stammered, his pale face flushing red. That can't be right. She doesn't live here anymore. This is ours. Hayes shook his head. No, you see, your mother anticipated exactly this betrayal. She protected herself. Legally, you have no claim. Everything you flaunted these past weeks was never yours to begin with. The crowd buzzed louder, their admiration turning to judgmental stares. Then, from the back of the room, the sound of heels clicked against the marble floor. Clara stepped into the light, her elegant black dress flowing behind her. Her dark skin gleamed with dignity, her chin held high. The room hushed. I didn't come here to embarrass you, she said softly, though every word cut like thunder. I came to remind you of something you've forgotten. Love built this house. Sacrifice built this house. And yet, you tried to throw me out because of my skin? Because you thought you were entitled to what I gave you. Her eyes swept across the room, landing on Ethan and Grace, who stood pale and trembling. You thought this house defined power. But real power? Clara paused, letting the silence sharpen the moment. Is knowing who you are, and never letting hate destroy you. Guests began to murmur, their admiration for Ethan and Grace evaporating into disgust. Ungrateful children, someone whispered. They betrayed the woman who raised them, another said. Grace's face crumpled as tears welled in her eyes. Ethan clenched his fists, his pride collapsing into shame. But Clara didn't gloat. She didn't need to. Their downfall was written across their faces. Hayes stepped forward again. Effective immediately, Ethan and Grace are to vacate the premises. They have no legal rights to this property, nor to any of Mrs. Johnson's fortune. The siblings tried to protest, but their voices were drowned out by the whispers and stares of their peers. The party had become their stage of humiliation. Weeks later, the mansion stood quiet again, this time under Clara's full control. She had no interest in living there anymore. Instead, she donated the estate to a local foundation that supported underprivileged Black families, turning it into a community center filled with hope and opportunity. The $100 million from the sale went into scholarships, mentorship programs, and business grants for young Black entrepreneurs. Clara's name became not just one of wealth, but one of legacy and empowerment. Meanwhile, Ethan and Grace faded into obscurity. Without the wealth they depended on, they struggled to rebuild their lives. The world no longer admired them. They were remembered as the children who betrayed the woman who gave them everything. On a warm afternoon, Clara stood at the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the new community center, surrounded by children laughing and families smiling. Her voice trembled with emotion as she spoke to the crowd. Family is not blood. Family is not entitlement. Family is love, respect, and loyalty. Racism and greed destroy everything they touch, but kindness builds legacies that last forever. As the crowd applauded, Clara felt peace wash over her. She had lost 2 children, but in their place, she had gained a community, a family, a future, And that was worth more than any mansion or fortune.